Sunderland are back in the Premier League after 8 years away, following their win over Sheffield United at Wembley in front of 45,000 Mackhams. They return. In this video, I'm going to tell you about the story so far. Why are Sunderland already stylistically suited to the Premier League? What it takes to stay up in the top flight, and the potential new double pivot that includes new man Granit Xhaka. During the 2016-17 Premier League season, Sunderland finished bottom, winning just 6 games and accumulating only 24 points. But as Sunderland fans will tell you, that was only the start of a tragic period for the football club. They were relegated 2 years running and spent 4 years in League One before their return to the second tier in the summer of 2022. Sunderland were then on the rise again. The days of damaging ownership issues and scattergun recruitment strategies, well, they were well and truly a thing of the past. And through the Championship playoff final in May, they finally returned to the top flight after an 8-year absence. And that pretty much brings us up to present day. Sunderland last season under Regis Le Bris were absolutely fascinating. A breath of fresh air from the plug-and-play, high numbers of possession-based approaches we're so used to in the modern day. Sunderland ranked 12th when it came to average possession in the Championship last season and 10th for total passes attempted. That's less than every team that finished inside the top 6 places. Fintan O'Reilly, who primarily covers French football for Total Football Analysis, said this about Regis Le Bris when he was in charge of Lorient in Ligue 1. He likes his team to play in transition and is very comfortable without the ball, knowing the threat they can pose immediately on regaining possession. We see Lorient playing without the ball more often than not, conceding possession often, with Regis Le Bris happy to bet on his team's counter-attacking quality. The part that really stands out there is the section on being very comfortable without the ball and the decision to concede possession often. There's a few reasons why I've chosen that line specifically, but the biggest reason is I think that side of their game is going to play a really important role in determining their fate in the Premier League this season. That more than most, actually. Later, we're going to look at the last few clubs that were promoted to the Premier League and haven't left. And when we look at their approach, even now, you'll notice the stuff without the ball is totally paramount. In the Premier League, in the top flight, there is absolutely no room for error. This is a screenshot showing Sunderland's out of possession shape just 16 seconds before Midfielders scores the winner against Coventry in the first leg of the playoff semi-final. At this moment, Coventry are pretty comfortable in their own half. It's late in the game. They're choosing to go direct. Nothing unusual there really, until Sunderland as a collective decide to make a decision. This decision is shown clearly here when Enzo Laffi decides to aggressively pounce on the Coventry fullback and force him into making an error. Remember, this is the 88th minute of the game, with Sunderland already level with the home leg still to play. Meander's body language is positive as he's read the situation absolutely perfectly. We know the type of striker he is. He's quick, powerful, he wants to get in behind, and we know what happens next. He finishes brilliantly. This example is scarily accurate to the words that Fintan O'Reilly used 2 years ago. They were happy conceding possession in that moment. They were resolute out of possession, and they certainly pose a dangerous threat immediately after regaining possession. Last season, Sunderland made 2,320 ball recoveries, registered 50 fast breaks and scored 9 goals from those situations. They sat top of the table for every single one of those metrics. When it came to goals from direct attacks, they racked up 6 and converted 9 from high turnover situations. And you might have noticed, Sunderland fans, if you've watched the channel for a while, I used those exact quotes from Fintan O'Reilly when I did a deep dive on Sunderland back in October. At that point, Regis Le Bris had only been in the job for about 4 months, and I think it's fair to say his unique style hasn't just been a flash in the pan whatsoever. It's common knowledge that none of the Championship teams that were promoted into the Premier League 2 seasons ago survived. The 3 teams combined conceded 248 goals, won just 12 games, and Leicester, who finished 18th, still finished the campaign 13 points adrift from 17th place. So what needs to change? What does Sunderland need to do in order to beat the curve and stay in the top flight? Well, first, before we delve into what Sunderland have already done themselves, I think it's important we take a look at the last 3 teams that were promoted to the Premier League and have stayed in the league for a substantial amount of time. The 3, Nottingham Forest, Bournemouth, and of course, Brentford. Now, while their individual methods varied, the final outcome of long-term survival was achieved by all. Tactically, all three clubs knew they needed to evolve. They refused to lose their unique identities, but they made it very clear that improving their pragmatic side was going to be essential. Forest under Steve Cooper were compact and strong without the ball, but it became quite obvious quite quickly that the lack of goals was going to make it difficult in the long run. Nuno arrived and added another layer to their style, their ability to concede possession and attack often in transition. Sounds a bit like Regis Le Bris, I think. Brentford showed how the use of set pieces, both defensively and offensively, can be absolutely game-changing, whilst Bournemouth replaced Parker with O'Neill to bring stronger defensive organisation before appointing Iriola to progress the side further in attack. And I did sort of subtly mention there, I do see similarities between Nuno's approach with Forest and what we've seen from Le Bris so far at Sunderland. A heavy focus on robust, low to mid blocks and unpredictable aggressive press with a devastating transitional play. But I do want to come to that point I made about set pieces with Brentford, because there's definitely something there that Sunderland could exploit. In the Premier League, coming out on the right side of fine margins can often be the difference, simply because when the competition is so tight, split-second moments can decide a large number of points. We actually just did a video on Ipswich and spoke in detail about how on too many occasions they slipped on the wrong side of those fine margins and they paid the price. More than ever, teams are using set pieces to their advantage. In modern football, where games are often decided by fine margins, even more so for teams that are fighting down the bottom of the table, set pieces can be a really decisive factor. Whilst in open play, a lot of the game is uncontrollable, set plays are restart situations in the middle of the game. They can be practiced and ultimately, to a certain extent, can be controlled. And that got me thinking about Sunderland and their use of set pieces last season, especially offensively, because a minor improvement in that side of their game could be the difference. It could take them to another level. In the Championship last season, Sunderland sat in the bottom half for set play XG and around mid-table for set play scored. By no means were they bad, but I think it's something they could look at slightly more if they're planning to lose a bit of control in open play. And we'll come back to that later, because that's often the case when you're promoted into the Premier League. You don't have as much time and just as much of the ball, full stop. When it comes to recruitment, Forest, well, they signed 29 players after their playoff final win. Although team cohesion probably wasn't prioritised, the sheer number of players definitely allowed Steve Cooper to adapt, rotate and tactically experiment when times were tough. Brentford and Bournemouth approached things slightly differently. Brentford stuck to their data-driven approach and since then have been able to grow and challenge mid-table sides without spending a large amount. Bournemouth did lean towards team cohesion and kept the bulk of their promotion-winning squad the same, although when they did recruit, it felt like much more a case of quality over quantity, recruiting players that would improve them instantly. So with that in mind, let's take a look at Sunderland's approach in the market so far and understand a little bit more about what they've signed and where they fit. I'm intrigued by this midfield revolution. If we look at things broadly first, it's very clear Sunderland are looking to recruit young, high-ceiling European talents that should develop further and possibly quicker with exposure to regular Premier League football. The average age of their recruits so far is around 23.7 years of age, with only Salman Adingra playing Premier League football before in his career. I should caveat by saying that the average age there, I imagine, will slightly rise with the imminent arrival of Granit Xhaka. More on him later. Let's look at the centre of the pitch in particular, because compared to most areas, the midfield has probably seen the most change. This summer, Joe Bellingham left for Dortmund soon after the window opened, and since then, Sunderland, well, they've got to work, that's for sure. The signing of Habib Diarra broke Sunderland's transfer record back in July. He arrived from Strasbourg in Ligue 1 for a reported €30 million. And quite frankly, people are getting quite excited. Before we delve deeper into what he can bring to this team, I think it's important we understand what the Sunderland midfield shape looked like last season. Out of possession, things sort of stayed the same pretty much throughout. They opted with a 4-4-2 block against the ball in the Championship, notably with very little space in between teammates. With the ball, though, things changed a little bit more as the season progressed. Particularly in the early stages of the season, we saw Sunderland operating with a single 6, usually Dan Neil, with 2 advanced 8s, often Bellingham and Rigg in front of him. Later on in the campaign, Regis Le Bris almost started to introduce a 4-2-3-1 shape, with Dan Neil and Joe Bellingham playing a lot closer to each other and Bellingham much deeper than in his previous role. These are the average positions from Sunderland's win over Sheffield United in the playoff final. Dan Neil and Bellingham are almost completely in line with Enzo Laffi, the single attacking midfielder, finding pockets of space in the creative zones. So with all of that information in mind, where does Habib Diarra fit and why has he been signed? First and foremost, and this might not be the best piece of analysis you're going to get on this channel, but the guy's fun, like he's super fun. There's definitely elements of rawness to his game, but that's expected. He's 21. This is his season heat map in Ligue 1 last season, and straight away it's abundantly clear how many different parts of the pitch he operates in. He enjoys himself in the right channel for sure. That's quite clear when looking at the heat map, but you can also see a fair few touches in the opposition box too. 45 in Ligue 1 last season to be precise. His strong frame and long legs allows him to use his body exceptionally well. He's often shielding the ball and spinning away to accelerate. It's perfect for Sunderland's quick transitional approach. The French midfielder is a natural ball carrier too, averaging 2.33 progressive carries per 90 last season, and interestingly 0.43 carries into the penalty area per 90 as well. And interestingly, for a central midfielder who isn't playing as a traditional number 10, he's really creative. He registered 9 goal involvements last season, created 27 chances, and look out for his unique lofted passes into the centre forward, because he does that really often to great effect. You'll see it in the Premier League, I'm sure of it. Some lofted, delicate passes into the centre forward. It's a very, very unique aspect to his game. You won't miss it. So in answer to the original question, where does the energetic Diarra fit in this season? Well, I think it's between two midfield roles. It's evident he's not a destructive midfielder. He only won 13 tackles last season. So I don't think he's the 6 or the Dan Neil upgrade, but to play alongside a defensive midfielder in a double pivot, or maybe even as the most advanced player in the trio, I can totally understand the appeal. Sticking with the midfield, it looks like Granit Xhaka will be finally making his move to the Black Cats this summer. So the question once again I pose is, why? Obviously, beyond the fact he's a wonderful midfielder that brings leadership, world-class abilities. I mean, it's pretty obvious, isn't it, really? But if we do look slightly deeper for a moment, it's common knowledge that sides that are promoted to the Premier League are forced to sacrifice a fair amount of the ball. In fact, over the last 3 seasons, the Premier League clubs that have averaged the lowest amount of possession have all been newly promoted teams. We also know Sunderland under Regis Le Bris, even in the Championship, were not centred around having ludicrous amounts of the ball anyway. So when they do have it, it's about being as effective as possible. And spoiler, that tends to require pretty good footballers. And well, thankfully, we know Granit Xhaka is a really talented footballer and in possession is still one of the best midfielders in Europe. The Swiss currently sits in the top 3% for passes attempted per 90 compared to every player in Europe's top 5 leagues, accumulating a pass completion rate of 90.2%. The sheer brilliance of that pass completion rate is emphasised further when I tell you that Xhaka is averaging 9.54 progressive passes per 90. These aren't passive passes, sideways, backwards passes. These are passes that are making things happen often within games. So if we do zoom out a little bit further to conclude, this signing isn't all about him still being really good at football, because he absolutely is. And for a newly promoted team, this is a ridiculous coup. But he also brings experience and guidance to this young group. And the fact he's played in the Premier League for so long as well, I think both are absolutely priceless for Sunderland. If you want to know why Ipswich struggled in the Premier League and what they've learnt from their experiences as they return to the Championship, there's a video on the channel right now that delves into exactly that.